So, Sophie, thanks so much for coming and joining us at Audible to chat about your new book. It covers activism as the sort of key topic. So I wondered if we could start with an explanation of what activism is.
That's a great question to start with. And one of the things I found really interesting in interviewing lots of activists for the book was that many of them said, I'm not an activist. I think many people have this sense that an activist is a very sort of gung-ho character who, like there's the sort of the eco-warriors that scaled the BP ships, or the brilliant women who abseiled down the side of Parliament or into the House of Commons. I think actually what activism is taking action, breaking down a big vision of hope into daily actions in order to move forward towards the goal that you have set yourself.
And you said a lot of the people you interviewed said they weren't activists.
Yes.
What did they say they were? What did they feel they were if straight away they were like, I'm not sure if I'm an activist?
Well, I mean, one of the great things was that very few of them were sitting around thinking about what they called themselves. They were pretty much just getting on with the things that were most pressing to them. And I'm totally with that. I mean, I was asked in another interview recently whether I saw myself as, and I couldn't answer it because I don't really sit around thinking about how I see myself. What I'm interested in and what the book is particularly interested in is what does action look like? What does what does activism look like? When it's a trendy word, there are a lot of people that use it, but actually, what's the grit? Where's the grit of it in the day-to-day?
And why is it so important? Why is it a topic we should all be considering?
Well, I mean, I would like people to be considering it. That sounds a bit forceful, but I mean, I think we are living in times when we have never faced such big questions and they're huge, and we are, as a mass population, roiled and rocked by them, from considering the fragility of our beautiful earth that is becoming much more transparent and evident, to the really yawning inequality of our societies, to what community looks like in a global world, to whether technology is going to free us or actually trap us. I mean, any one of those is massive, and together they can really seem overwhelming, and that it can feel much easier just to sort of go, oh no, I'm just going to get on with my little life here. But I also think it's also becoming increasingly evident that many of our systems are broken and dysfunctional, and they can't be fixed with tweaks. And what we really need are new ideas. And that means new people. That means different ways of thinking. That means the very person who right now is thinking, that's far too big for me, I couldn't possibly, might be exactly the person who's got the idea that we need. And so what I really feel very strongly about is encouraging as many people as possible to feel that they can be part of this huge action that we need to take individually and collectively to start to build a world that just simply functions better for everybody.
And so tell me how you go about doing that in the book, 5 Rules for Rebellion.
Well, I started considering the book in autumn of 2018. I had been an activist, a campaigner, if you like, for about 10 years by then. And I became a campaigner through necessity. It took me 5 years to get a diagnosis for my daughter, who has autism, and it was such a long slog, and it was such a painful process of misunderstanding and rejection, and And so out of necessity, I became a campaigner for equal rights for people with disabilities, and particularly for women and girls on the autism spectrum, because I really saw firsthand and quite brutally how bad we are at understanding difference, at exploring difference, at accepting difference, at building systems that work for people who are different, how bad we are at valuing care and carers. That was like a punch in the face. You know, the vast numbers of people who provide care unpaid and unseen, the social underpinning of our economy. So there was a whole load of stuff that I had learned over 10 years. I had started to work as a journalist. I became a campaigner. I started working with the Women's Equality Party, which is Britain's first feminist political party, which was formed out of a huge impatience with all the politicians that kept telling us to, just hang on about another 100 years and we'll get round to women's equality at some point. So, I found myself after 10 years of this, in that autumn, just really exhausted, and to be perfectly frank, demoralised. Just the 4 years during which time I had led the Women's Equality Party had been an absolutely extraordinary time for politics around the world. I had led the party through the EU referendum, through that dreadfully divisive campaign, through a period of time when President Trump was elected and we started to see a real resurgence of sort of strongman populist politics all around the world. The Me Too movement and the backlash. We had that really painful 2017 general election. It was just an extraordinary time, and I was really flagging, frankly. I was really flagging, and I had to step back. I felt like the rage and pain of the world was just too much, and that I as an individual couldn't actually really do very much about it, was where I'd got to. And, there was always somebody ready to tell you that you're a really crap feminist, so don't bother. And I just really needed to stop, so I stopped. And I sat on my couch with the curtains closed and watched a lot of box sets. And then I started reading, and then I started writing. I'm a journalist. I've been a journalist, all my life, and I write my way through problems that I want to get to grips with. And I thought, okay, so there has to be a sustainable form of activism that can nourish as we learn. It shouldn't feel like a series of pitched battles. My working title for this book was How to Be an Activist and Not Go Mad. But as I read a whole bunch of stuff, from philosophy to current affairs, and as I, tracked down interesting activists doing interesting work, a cycle, if you like, became apparent to me, and this became the philosophy of activism that I realised as I wrote was these, could be summed up by these 5 rules, which are very much it's circular. We will come back to despair, we will come back to anger, we will come back to hope. We will continue to find ways to collaborate and to persevere. And each time we come through the cycle, we will, I hope, be able to find ways to sustain.
And in the book, you interview a lot of different activists,
yes,
who are campaigning across a variety of issues.
Yes.
How did you choose who you'd speak to and what issues you were going to feature?
I just went where the stories took me. I decided I would have no preconceived plan. I was really interested to find out about new people. And I asked a lot I just asked who's doing interesting stuff. And every time I interviewed one person, I asked them, who should I be talking to? What have you heard lately in terms of interesting work that's happening? And it was really fascinating. I really loved it. And I was incredibly grateful to all the people who made time to talk to me about what they were doing.
And you mentioned there's some sort of the anger and things that come with activism. How can we channel that in order to keep focused on the issues we care about rather than it making us feel alienated from being able to make anything happen?
I think, I think there are a lot of angry people out there, so feeling angry should not make you feel alone. I think the issue really is to not let it corrode you, to eat away at the inside of you. And I think for women in particular, it is sometimes difficult to confront our anger and to get to grips with our anger because we're told as women to behave in a certain way. You know, how many women have been told just as they're walking around to cheer up, love, or to smile because our faces are not expressing placatory contentment at all times. When women express their anger, they're often told they're being over-emotional or hysterical or feisty. This is a word which is used for women and animals, and it means, sort of brave in a small way. And I think, but what I found really interesting was talking to therapists and philosophers and reading about, reading up certain philosophers who've looked really closely at anger, is that anger, it tells you stuff. And if you listen to it, it will guide you. It will put you in touch with what's bothering you. And it will give you a direction. And there's this wonderful thing that the philosopher Martha Nussbaum calls transition anger, which is when you can use your anger to take you into a place where you can do something about it.
Do you feel like that's something that, since reading that, you've been able to take on yourself?
Yes, I struggle. I mean, I struggle. And there are still days when I come in and, swear a lot and slam doors and march up and down. Nobody is. This is not a book about being Zen, right? But it is a book about finding energy, positive energy from the stuff that can really make you feel bad.
And a lot of it as well is about hope and maintaining that hope.
Yes.
How can we stay hopeful?
I mean, that was a revelation for me. The moment when I realised that hope was the ultimate act of defiance. Not some wishy-washy thing, always hoping, but really a warrior cry. That was a key moment in my understanding of the things that can sustain you through activism. I think, and I also discovered it when I would talk about myself as being a feminist, and some people go. And then I would say I'm an optimistic feminist, I'm a hopeful feminist, they'd be like, oh God, she's serious.
Thank you so much, Sophie. It's been a pleasure to chat to you.
Thank you, you're welcome.